I'm Uriah Kaiser. This is Potomac Local Live. Joining us today is Supervisor Ruth Anderson of the Ococquan District. She's here to talk to us about expanding the acreage of parks, the number of acres devoted to parks in the Ococquan District, where it's pretty much already developed. If you're familiar with the district, it is in eastern Prince William County, heavily developed district, but yet the supervisor is working to bring more parkland to the district. Supervisor Anderson, thank you for joining us on the show today. Tell me first, we've got two big initiatives that we've been reporting about here at Potomac Local. One is 15 acres of land at the intersection of Old Bridge Road and Oakwood Drive in Lake Ridge. You wanted to name this park for the late Michele McQuigg, who was a longtime member of the House of Delegates, who was a Board of Supervisors, actually was the Ococquan District Supervisor at a time, and her last job was, of course, the clerk of the court at Prince William County. You wanted to name this park for her. There were people that at a Parks Commission, there were several people who spoke in favor of naming this park for her in July. However, as we reported, the Park Commission decided to restart the naming process, to go back to the drawing board essentially, and start the naming process all over. They did not feel as if she was the right person to name this park after. Supervisor, what's your reaction to all that?
Well, number one, Michele McQuigg is a longtime public servant for Prince William County, starting in the Occoquan District back in the day when the district was actually smaller. It ended at Springwood Drives on the west end. And Michele was a fierce fighter for saving land from development so that we could have things like open space and passive parks, more public green space. And she saved that 15 acres several times. There were times when people wanted to build schools there and of course residences and things like that. So she worked hard on saving that 15 acres. When I came into office, we got it zoned for parks and open space. And then we decided that it would make a wonderful trailhead on for the Occoquan Greenway Trail that will eventually stretch from the McCourt Government Center all the way to the town of Occoquan. It makes a perfect spot for people to pull in and either go west or east on the Occoquan Greenway Trail. The residents that live around that area, the ones that have spoken to me, want that 15 acres to remain as passive as possible. But most of them that I've spoken to so far are acclimating to the fact that we could at least have a trailhead in there with maybe a picnic table, some explanation of the entire trail, probably restrooms, that type of thing.
So it's important to note that the reason the Parks Commission took exception, as well as some people who voiced their comments on social media, is that McQuigg did not want to allow same-sex couples to be married at the Prince William County Courthouse. She challenged in federal court to not have these marriages take place in the courthouse. She lost that challenge, and as we reported, she then overnight decided that she would reverse her decision. And I talked to one of the celebrants that performed these civil unions, these marriages, and they said that she sent out an email saying, you either marry everyone or you marry no one. And so it was that was what we reported. That's what we heard at the Parks Commission meeting. But it seems like that is enough to get a lot of people, and those on the Parks Commission, to think twice and may not want to name this park after Michele McQuigg. What's your reaction to that?
Well, the history that you have just cited is the history that I know, and she did challenge it at the federal level. She stood for traditional marriage in accordance with the Virginia Code at the time, and yes, your history is correct. and then she followed the law of the land when the decision came back. Michele's service is I would say, second to none at 3 different levels of government, and just unbelievable dedicated service. She is remembered by so many residents as the lady that walked up to their door with a hat and tennis shoes. She did door to door. Unlike most politicians, she did door to door almost every year, even when it wasn't election time, just to find out what the constituents needed. And I still hear stories about how Michele McQuigg helped this constituent and that constituent with road issues and watershed issues and social services issues. She is still warmly remembered by a majority of people that live here in the Ococquan District, and her service is to be commended.
So it's important to point out that that you put forward this naming recommendation to the Parks Commission, which then, according to its rules, has to convene a committee. That committee is made up of people who are on the commission, residents who live in the Ococquan District, that come together and decide whether or not the name that is suggested is proper for the park, right? Through my reporting, I learned that it's not the committee's job to come up with another alternative, right, for an alternate name. They're only to consider the name that was given. And so there was a lot of confusion when the Parks Department put out a survey on Facebook, because the 2 options were Michele McQuigg Park or Michele B. McQuigg Park with her middle initial. And so that's why we reported on that. Now the Parks Commission going back to the drawing board, and they're actually going now to involve every single Parks Commission member, in addition to the Parks and Rec Director and people who live residents of the Ococquan District. Is this all just become too much? Is this sort of overkill? Are we overthinking this, or did the Parks Commission make the right decision by restarting the process?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate that we couldn't get a definitive vote on this name for someone who served our community so well. You know, we name public buildings, schools, and the library is named Chin Library. We have so many different names on public facilities. And actually, Michele McQuigg deserves even more than a park named after her. But I chose this park from the supervisor perspective because I know what she did to save this 15 acres of land. So it is very unfortunate that after 30 people showed up at the commission meeting, and I think it was over a dozen people who spoke in favor of the naming, bipartisan. Some were known Democrats who spoke in favor of Michele McQuigg. So it's unfortunate, but the Parks Commission does have its naming process. So I'm going to let the naming process play out for now. But my goal still is that the park would be named after Michele McQuigg.
It is important to point that out, and you are correct. There were a number of Republicans that spoke in favor of Michele McQuigg. There were also some familiar faces who I've seen speak at Board of Supervisors meetings in favor of known Democrats, as you said. So it's important to note that people on both sides of the aisle spoke in favor of Michele McQuigg. I want to switch gears on you here. I want to go over to Harbor Drive. There is a park right near Tackett's Mill. It is at the site of this underutilized, or I don't even know if people use it anymore, but it was a commuter lot, and you now want to make this old commuter lot into a new park. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. When I was elected to office, one of the first things I did was I took a driving tour with my chief of staff and my planning commissioner, and we drove all over the district, specifically focused on areas that might be redeveloped, areas that could possibly become parkland, and this is one of the areas that we focused on. Because in our research, we found out that the commuter lot hadn't been used for years, ever since the widening of Minnieville Road, and they changed the structure of the median. And so it wasn't easy now for commuters and for buses to use that commuter lot. So because there really was no hope for it to regain its status as an active commuter lot, we decided that it would make a great park for that neighborhood. As you said in the preview of this interview, we do have the least amount of public green space in the Ococquan District compared to other districts. And I am trying to save any possible areas that we have that can be used for park space. This is a 2.5 acre parcel. About a half acre of it was owned by the Service Authority, and they have conveyed that over to us. And now we're working on the right-of-way situation, the resolution that was voted yesterday, so that we can begin working on this 2.5 acre park. It's only 2.5 acres. And our initial thoughts that it might be a wonderful place for a community garden. Mm-hmm. So many people cannot grow their own gardens around here because of the deer population, other kinds of animals and insects and so on. And it's a crowded area with apartments, townhouses, some homes. It's hard for people to have the resources to build big, tall fences, to keep the deer out and so on. So that was our initial thought. It might make a great community garden.
And just
but
to be clear,
not what the residents wanted. The residents made it very clear they did not want a community garden. But that it evolved into this idea for a wellness park. And so that is what we have settled on.
And you're going to call it right now, as you said earlier. You told me earlier that the tentative name is the Harbor Drive Wellness Park, and just so we're clear to give our audience just an idea of where this is located. It's very near the Centera. It's not a hospital, but it's an emergency outpatient center.
Right.
Very near where a new Lidl grocery store is being built, and it's not far from where the 5-story massive Kaiser complex, Kaiser Permanente complex, will be built further west on Minnieville.
Correct.
And so they want to. So you're saying that residents, which there are many who live around this piece of land, they want a passive park, more or less something to just walk a dog in or go and sit under a tree?
Well, at our public meetings, like I said, they didn't want a community garden because they were afraid it might become unkempt, and they didn't want that. They also didn't want a lot of noise, like a big band shell with bands and that kind of stuff going on. What they acclimated to was some workout equipment, and then there was several requests they wanted equipment that children as well as adults could work out on, and we took it a step further, and there were some families that wanted playground equipment for disabled children. So that is what we are focused on, is equipment. It's called universal playground equipment. And we plan to have equipment that for all ages, from toddlers to senior adults, even with disabilities, will be able to use this equipment outdoors. And there's even one piece of equipment that we're looking at where someone in a wheelchair could pull up to it and actually exercise their arms and so on a piece of equipment. So that is part of the park, is this workout equipment that's called universal playground and workout equipment.
And this is the second of 3 parks actually that you're focused on now. I want to move from Harbor Drive now over to the intersection of Smoketown and Old Bridge, right?
Yeah. Can I make one more comment about
absolutely.
Harbor Drive? A really interesting thing about it is this is a very nice spot. It's helping with our environment. We are going to plant a pollinator garden in this park also, and it's going to connect with Kaiser Permanente about a mile down Minnieville. So there will be a trail as part of this park that will connect with a trail in the Kaiser Permanente facility park, so that people will be able to run the distance at some point.
Is there a timeline when residents should expect this park to be open?
I would say late next year. The work should start, if all goes well, this fall. And by late next year, it could be complete.
And is there any associated price tag yet?
It's the price right now is over $1 million, like 1.2, 1.3 million. We a $25,000 grant was already awarded to us by Kaiser Permanente, and that was for design work and help with resourcing the public meetings that we had and a consultant. So that we've already done, we've already used. Now we're applying for more grants through Kaiser Permanente, and we might apply for grants through other sources too. We have $700,000 of taxpayer budget money that we are going to use to get started, and then we will wait for these other grants come in to see how much more we can do with the park.
And it's important to point out that this was not a part of the recently discussed bond referendum. This was not one of the parks projects that was included.
No, this is a public-private partnership.
Separate from
it was started before that ever took place.
Gotcha.
And so, the next park that you want to talk about at Smoketown and Old Bridge,
that's it,
is kind of a public-private partnership too, because it's a 5-acre parcel that we did work on getting zoned for parks and open space. But there's a nonprofit group that is working on a memorial park. It's called the Charlie Boone Memorial Park. And you can Google it and find out more about it. And they are going through the planning process right now. We did the environmental study using office and county funds, the environmental study part of it. So it has been approved. Now this nonprofit that is going to name it the Charlie Boone Memorial Park is working on raising money for the infrastructure for a BMX facility BMX practice, and also a skateboard facility.
And so this will be open, obviously, this will be a public park like the other two that we've discussed.
Yes. And Locapelt, our local civic association in that area, is very much behind this park, and they have a great group for their committee for this nonprofit. So it's going well. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a few years to raise the money necessary, but they're working hard.
And again, the total amount of money that's needed, you might have said this before, but I'll ask again, was there a total price tag on this?
The amount that they need to raise is right around $700,000.
Okay. But
they are getting some donations instead of dollars. They are getting some donations in terms of skills, engineering skills, and that type of thing.
Okay. And is there a website for more information if people wanted to find out more about this park? Is there a place where they can go?
There is. And I don't have that with me
but if you Google
at this moment, but we do have it here at the office.
Okay. So you can call the supervisor's office.
Yes.
So it's pwcgov.org, and just search Ococquan District Supervisor Ruth Anderson.
I can give you our office number, 703-792-4643.
And here come the calls about that and all the new parks that you're talking about and focused on in the Ococquan District. Supervisor, thank you for coming on today. We certainly appreciate you sharing this information with our audience.
You're welcome. Thank you, Uriah.
Have a good day.